go around one by one, and if each of you could tell us a bit about your family background or your personal background, like where your family come from, and maybe also perhaps what role do you think your family have played in your connection to your faith?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Pōrana, ko Italia, ko Romania, ko Airana, nā whakarana mai. Engari, ko Minnesota, te whenua tupu, ko te awa kairangi te kāinga, no te una I titi te iti au, ki nainai o e noho ana. Hei kai whakamahere ora o ko Arkuash, toku hoa rangatira, ko Bakultur toku whanau, ko Abi toku ingoa. Tēnā katoa, tato katoa. So my name is Abby. I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to sit. I'm from the United States. I've been in New Zealand 7 years. I'm originally from all over the United States. I grew up in the beautiful state of Minnesota, and my parents live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've got a sister who lives in Portland, Oregon, and one who lives in Philadelphia. So sort of opposite coasts and south, and I was raised in the north. So real widespread there. And I was raised by a Jewish father and I think she would describe herself as a fallen Catholic mother. So my mom was born and raised Irish-Italian Catholic on the south side of Chicago. And my dad grew up Jewish in the greater Los Angeles area, where I think that Dave is very familiar with. And when I was growing up, it was we were raised Jewish. There was not a question. My mom wasn't super tied to her religion, and Jewish is sort of all I've ever been, and it's been a really big, important part of my life from when I was younger, and kind of wandered away a bit and wandered back when I moved to New Zealand, because I found, I think something that's really important for me is being grounded in community, and that's where I made my community when I moved to Wellington. So oh, and I have a lovely husband who is not here, but is at home taking care of our sweet dogs and cat, and he's also pretty awesome. That's me.
Kia ora. It's very nice meeting you. I don't think I can pull out to that. I'm Darlene. I'm originally born in Malaysia. 4 siblings, and a very loving Catholic family. We've been very close and being very involved in the parish life, but it was not only until probably in my early 20s where I had a spiritual awakening of when I really discovered my identity in the Catholic faith. So I've lived in New Zealand for over 20 years and started schooling here at high school, uni, and work. And I now work as a environmental sort of consultant in an engineering firm. So basically my day-to-day job involves a lot of field assessments, looking at building inspections and smelling the air. That's what, I can't remember the other questions you actually asked.
I also asked a bit about the role your family has had in your faith.
Being part of a very big family, we all have different characters and personalities, but there's one common thing that the importance was being close to God, and that was always a daily reminder from my parents, and I think the importance was being passed from generations to generations to know where you're coming from and how you can give to the community and to your friends or everyone that you meet along the way.
Yes.
Nice to meet you guys, even though we've met over Zoom before, but it's very nice to meet you all today, and I'm honoured to be here from Sydney, first time here in New Zealand, in Wellington, We went to the museum today. I'm actually of the Turkish heritage, so we went to the Gallipoli Museum, and I guess it was kind of emotional at the same time for me, to be honest. But I guess now we have something that connects us, and that I find important. So I was born and raised in Turkey. My dad was an imam and a preacher. He used to give these talks in big mosques. And my mum was a Quran teacher, so she'd actually had her own Quran center where she'd teach girls and women how to read Quran. And she used to take us along with her as well. So I remember being 8, 9 years old teaching people much older than me how to read Quran. So I would probably say that I was raised in a devout and practicing Muslim family. My mum, for example, would come in the morning. We have the dawn prayer, so we gotta wake up at 6 a.m. She come once, she come twice, third, thrice. If you're not up, she come in screaming. Just to make sure that you're up. So I thank her for that because I've really built a habit of being able to wake up for those early morning prayers. But I came to Australia when I was 11 years old, and obviously a massive culture shock coming from Turkey with English whatsoever, and then you have to restart your life. Parents are religious, you're religious, you come and then you go to a public school where the dominant culture is not so religious, and faith is not really part of the school at all. So I must say that I've struggled quite a bit trying to fit into the dominant culture. And at some points I thought I was living a double life where I come home, because my dad was sent as an imam by the Turkish government to the mosque in Wollongong, which is very similar to this beautiful town of yours. You've got the mountains and the beaches, so I really loved coming here. So I was pretty much spending a lot of time in the mosque as my dad was the imam, but I would go to school, and my people around me, I hardly had any Muslims. So I'd act differently to how I was with my friends as to how I would act in the mosque and around the congregation. But I think those teenage years after that, what my parents perhaps had really put in my upbringing were important in preserving me. And I remember once we went to a birthday party, it was the 16th birthday party, and we just in the backyard, there's music, and then the mother comes and starts handing out alcohol to each of my friends. So my turn came, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? Parents are not there, But I said no, thank you. So I was able to that. I think my family's really upbringing in my faith had made it strong. So I kind of finished high school in Wollongong. Then I moved to university in Sydney. I feel that God has brought not just my family, but other people in my life as well, where I was really struggling with my faith identity and what to do, etc. But I was able to really kind of hold myself down. And when I finished high school, my dad always used to say, from an imam family should come out an imam. And he said, that's you. Out of 4 of us, for some reason he had chosen me in his head. And so when I finished, I said to my dad, okay, how do I become an imam? He said, you have to go back to Turkey and study 4 or 5 years, do theology studies and come back. I said, I'm not leaving you guys for that long. And that's why I started doing all those engineering, commerce, economics. 6 years later, I found out that I didn't want to do any of those after trying a few different degrees. But then that's when I started my Master of Islamic Studies. I started also exploring abroad, what can I do with, the language of the Quran is Arabic, so it's, I want to learn how to understand the Quran in its original form. So I went overseas a few times, came back as well, did some trips. And for the past 5 years I've been working with where I am right now, the Islamic Science and Research Academy. And I'm a father of two boys who like wrestling and kicking and doing all those things the boys do. And married happily. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for those answers. My question was going to be, why do you think your faith has continued to remain central in your lives? Because obviously it doesn't for everyone. A lot of people grow up and when they leave their immediate family, they lose their connection to their faith. You answered that quite well, Ahmed, but I'm going to ask both of you, Abby and Dali, if you could answer that question. And perhaps when the mic gets to you, Ahmed, could you tell us what advice would you give to people who do lose their faith when they get to the age where they leave their family? Just because you already gave a quite good answer to that question. Why do you think your faith has remained central to your life after moving out of home?
Well, for a while it didn't. I had my bat mitzvah when I was 12, was sort of is that ceremony of becoming a Jewish adult, and then went through high school, sort of was part of the community, and then went to university, went to Israel, did the thing, and that was sort of, I still felt linked in with my faith then, and then after that I kind of just dropped off. I went and lived in Poland for a couple of years, I lived in Scotland for a couple of years. In those situations, I sort of only checked in with the community on major holidays, so like the high holidays were Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and on Pesach. I hosted a Seder where I was the only Jewish person, just so I could have a Seder, which was really fun. But and then wasn't really going to synagogue regularly, didn't really have a community that was like, I felt grounded when I went back to the US. I think what brought me back when I came here was, one, I didn't actually expect there would be many Jewish people in New Zealand. I was like, there's going to be two, and neither of them will be my age. And so I was really fortunate in that I came to Temple Sinai for some services when I moved out here, and I didn't know anyone, and besides my partner and his family, I'm pretty independent, I wanted to make my own friends, and so I went to the place where I knew I could make friends, that's just sort of how I started building my community here, and then, and I'm sure it's similar in pretty much every other faith. Once you've been there a while, people say, you're young, would you like to be involved in things? Are you interested in X? And lovely Harvey Lipschitz, who's here today, looped me into the ritual committee. He said, you only have to come to one meeting and then you can decide. And I'm still on it 3-4 years later, with Dave as well. I've joined the service leadership team. I've ended up chairing the board, things like that. And I think part of why that's all happened is because for me, being Jewish isn't just the religious stuff. It's the community stuff. It's the fact that part of being Jewish means caring about the people in the world around you and building community where you are. And that's somehow I've gone from being a person who just kind of wanted to have a Seder with some friends so I could eat the food I like, to actually feeling really into it. So that's me.
I firmly believe that it's a power of prayer, that my mom is her prayers have actually definitely, even though she doesn't say much, it's definitely made me be still remaining in the faith. But there were times, maybe since when I was 15, in high school, probably full of anxiety, what's next? It's because you're kind of like entering that stage where you're going to uni, you don't know what you're doing. But I really don't know how and why I'm still remaining very strong in my faith. But I really do believe it's a power of prayer and a lot of silent and meditations. Throughout the years, it's, I guess, part of my character is I don't have much strength in saying no. But the more I said yes to things that the parish that I was involved with in Christchurch or in Auckland and Wellington, kept saying yes, but it opened my mind a lot more to receiving the graces and the gifts from God. So by attending, Mass, and it's a beautiful thing because it's in the silence that I hear His voice a lot more, and that has made my faith a lot strong, and how I respond to other people as well, and how I can be present in service as well. And it's something that I look forward to each day, being present with other people. So in terms of where I am 15 years ago and 15 years now, it's just brought me stronger each day through saying yes to things that I don't know what will bring. But it has definitely brought a lot of blessings to be open to knowing more of God in different perspectives as well. I have a lot of Muslim friends being from Malaysia as well, here in Wellington as well, and when they talk about their faith, it's a beautiful thing. And a whole range of Christian denominations as well, to get to know why they think, how I think about the Catholic faith. I don't know the full, it's a whole mystery, but it's a beautiful mystery too. He keeps whispering and pulling me back into the faith in the silence. When I go into church, when there's adoration, where basically adoration is a time of silence. We have monstrance and the Eucharist there on the altar, and it's just focused on Him, and you know more of Him. And my faith is a roller coaster, but I think that my roller coaster is going upwards. Yeah, I think that's
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask you, Ahmed. Sorry, I was just going to ask you. I mean, maybe you do want to answer the same question of these guys. What has kept you connected to your faith? But I was going to ask you instead because I thought maybe you felt like you answered it. But it was, what advice would you give to young people who struggle to maintain the connection to their faith once they leave their immediate family?
Usually in the Muslim tradition, youth leave their homes when they get married. So I actually have a friend, a Lebanese friend, young man, he's 23 years old. He said he was moving out. Hell broke loose at home. What do you mean you're moving out? You're not getting married. So it's like seen a bit of a big thing for the Muslim community. So the sense of community is very strong within the Muslims. I think that makes a lot of difference, to be honest, and it makes it a bit easier for the Muslim youth to also stick to their faith and keep their faith too. But having said that, like there's a lot of people walking away from especially organized religion. Like we see in Australia that some 30% of the Australian society, according to the 2021 census, identify as no religion. So that doesn't mean that they're atheists, but they don't identify with an organized religion. And I do deal with youth, and I'm seeing that they are struggling with their faith. I'm talking about the Muslim youth here. So the way I look at it is, I think, like how do you value faith? That's important. And I feel that faith has become, or religion has become a bit of a taboo nowadays in this. I know, in fact, in universities, talking about faith is one of the last things that the students want to do, and I've been through that. So, and same thing goes, I think, with the work culture and just society in general. So I would actually say number one, like exploring what faith means to you. Like the youth need to see. For me, it's like a light switch. When there's no faith, everything's dark. There's no meaning. It's hard to give meaning to suffering. It's hard to give meaning to happiness and everything that happens around us. But as soon as I turn that switch on, everything makes sense all of a sudden around the room, and I can see if someone's coming at me, if someone hits me, I know why I've been hit. I can give meaning to that. So I think for youth, I feel that they need to see meaning in religion first and foremost. They need to understand that like through faith, I'm able to actually understand what's happening in my life and give meaning to it and have a purpose. Because as people of faith, we do, like as Muslims, we do believe there's a hereafter, there's things beyond this world. Not everything can be answered in this world. Not, absolute justice cannot be established in this world. A lot of us bleed, a lot of us suffer. So then, how do I make sense of this at all? I have friends who have questioned these things, and when I asked them what kept you, they said it's my faith that really held me, despite seeing that there's so much injustice or corruption or oppression in the world. And I feel that's been big for youth from different faiths and backgrounds, especially lately. So that's number one, I would say. Number two is, I think Abby already talked about this community aspect of faith. I just find it really beautiful. Like we just did a trip to Adelaide as a group of with volunteers, and it's like a fellowship in a way which does not have any expectations. I think we have quite transactional lives. So you go to work, sometimes your relationships are transactional. Your even family relationships could become transactional at times, unfortunately, right? So I think that faith brings something that's beyond you and I. It brings God into the picture, and it allows us to be able to engage without those expectations and with an ulterior motive that we're all in Islam servants of God, and you want to serve God. So our relationship is one of the brothers and sisters to one another. And I think that aspect of faith is really enjoyable, keeps you together. Mental health wise, it's very, very important. Like I have a psychiatrist friend, he keeps talking about gatherings and being together and communication with people as one of the major contributors to a good mental health. So I feel those two aspects are very important.
Awesome, thank you, Ahmed. My next question is, in what ways does your faith encourage you to work for a better world? And can you please give us some examples?
A really core tenet for Judaism, and my Judaism, is the idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world. And that I work in mental health, and part of, I guess, when I was finishing my counseling training, we had to talk about the things in our lives that brought us to the work we do. One of them was Mr. Rogers, for anyone who knows. Oh, Dave knows. It's a very nice American man who had a television program about kindness and on public television, and he was really great. And the other is tikkun olam. And I think part of being a Jew means working to repair the world in whatever way we can. And it's the idea of, if you can find a way to be useful, be useful. And thinking about thinking about examples, like one is the work I do. So I work in counseling. I've been counseling since 2013. And I've worked with clients from age 5 to 85. My preference are the 5 to 12-year-olds. Those are the most interesting young people to work with. I've done play therapy, I do Lego therapy, I now work with teenagers, I've worked with adults living with HIV, I've worked with people, I volunteered at a hospice for 6 years. Like it's the idea of the things I do and the way I put myself out in the world is fully informed by my faith. I never want to be doing something that doesn't feel like it's helping someone else, because that's the whole point. That's the point of being in the world. That's the point of being a Jew, is to work to make the world better. And I realize I've just done a bit of an American thing, which is I'm tall poppy, I'm like, oh, I'm so great. But no, it is the idea of actually, yeah, sometimes I have days where I feel like really hopeless and I don't want to do anything and I feel really petty and spiteful because I'm human. But ultimately, it's about starting each day with the intention of doing good in the world. And that's it. Yeah.
From a Christian point of view, sorry, there's silence there. Is following the footsteps of Christ. And for me, it's constantly reflecting on the Beatitudes. So, particularly, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom in heaven. But when I constantly reflect on that, it's always in the back of my mind to be of service to anyone, whether it be people on the streets or just random people of whatever stage in their life. They might be going through a lot of things, mental health-wise. I may not be working in the mental sort of health industry or counseling side of things, but even as an individual, we are called to just be there for that person, to listen, to do good. I guess for an example, at work, as an environmental consultant, as God created the world, birds, trees, I chose the role that I'm in to be able to protect the environment as guardianship, as environmental stewardship. So doing all that I can with the talents that He has given me to do as much as I can to protect the earth, but also how I can make the environment sustaining one for people. Yes, doing good with the talents that I have been given, which is rigorous studies maybe, and but also taking step by step each day to be doing good and in service of others. Outside of the sort of like work that I do, I've worked sort of volunteered in hospices and in palliative care as well. And it's kind of lonely when you're in a palliative care because they don't have anyone to talk to. Even though they can't talk with you, it's also a very great service just to be able to serve them in silent. So I learned a lot from that experience and hopefully something that I can share with people. So it's bringing the meaning and the value as well.
Okay, so for me, I mean, making a better world is, I think, something that we all want to do in this room, I feel. But then, how much of the world affairs can we influence anyway, right? So that's how I look at it. So I look at my own world. To me, okay, what can I do? What's really my influence? What could be my impact? So I've tried to carve a bit of an influence area for myself and have really focused my energy on what I can do. So like the organization I work with, I actually strongly identify with its mission and vision, and that is to serve the community. That's what we do as an organization. We provide Islamic education, remove misunderstandings, misconceptions, and so forth. But the Quran actually says that, in Arabic, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the son of Adam. So the Quran doesn't say, we have honored the Muslims. Like it says, we have honored the son of Adam. So God actually reminds me as a Muslim that, hey, all these people who may even disbelieve in me, I am providing their sustenance, I'm looking after them, and they're taking their share of my mercy, of my compassion, of my love, and so forth. So telling me that you also, as a Muslim, in the Quran, that you need to honor people as well. So I really, as as a Muslim, I feel that giving every person their dignity, their honor, when they need, meeting their need. For example, I was at a train station once, and I remember we were in the line. This lady, I think the F-Post machine was working. This was a number of years ago. She had to pay cash, but she had no cash. Her train was getting late, and I saw that. I just came out of the line. I went to the cashier and I just paid. And she was you didn't have to. She was looking for an ATM somewhere. But I just thought at that point, this person needs help, right? And it doesn't matter what background they are. I didn't even know the lady, and I've never seen that lady again in my life, to be honest. But I just, gave that so that she could. I know she was probably running late to work, whatever it was. Just the other night, for example, I was with a friend speaking till 3 a.m. about his family issues. We had to wake up early. We were on a trip. But I feel that as a Muslim, especially, these personal relationships, personal influence that we can have to people around us, to give time. I think time is the most valuable asset for any one of us here. We can do many things with the time that we're given. We can go make money. We can go, get a better career, and we can obviously spend on our family. But can we choose to spend it on others? I think that really makes a valuable difference to the people around you. And sometimes I think you can transform people through even one or two incidents. Their thinking changes, and they become better people. And I guess people are the ones who make the world a better place. We just watched the video of Fethullah Gulen. He actually started as an imam in a mosque, like my dad. My dad used to give talks as well, but not too many people follow my dad. But a lot of people ended up following and were inspired by Fethullah Gulen, and he said we got to provide education. So people actually went overseas, left their homes, careers, etc., and went and became teachers, and they established schools and so forth. And I'm personally inspired, by him as well. So I'm like, wow, one person can make so much difference in the world. There's hundreds and hundreds of schools around the world. Muslim, non-Muslim, by the way, right? They teach and educate the people, which I think and today is another byproduct of, again, his teachings, that we reach out to each other and we can actually communicate with one another. And we're speaking with Solomon just on the back of recent incidents that's taking place overseas. It's so hard to sit down and talk to one another as a Muslim and a Jew, right? It's become a real challenge. We're so polarized that we're all in our own echo chambers that we can't even communicate with one another. So even this is, I think, something that is contributing towards a better world, hopefully.
My next question is, as a young person of faith, why do you think people of your age are less inclined to participate in practices of organized religion? And also, conversely, what is meaningful to people of your age in terms of religious and spiritual practice?
I think I would say I don't 100% know. Mostly because, any faith isn't a monolith, and any age group isn't a monolith. So it's the idea of different people need different things, and different people move away for different reasons. I was at a conference in Australia last year with a bunch of Jewish congregations from all over Australia, and 2 of us from New Zealand. And the big question was, how do we get young people involved again? Why have young people gone away? My question is always is, am I still young? Yes. So part of what, I guess the conversation, that conversation was the idea of some people, everyone needs something different from their faith. Some people, and because young encompasses actually a pretty wide range, young is basically, 18 to 40? I mean, anyone can argue with me. Sorry for those who are over 40, I saw a wince for a friend. But the idea of you have different needs if you are starting a family. You have different needs if you are wanting to be political. You have different needs if you are finding your way back to God. You have different needs if you are just wanting to meet people. If you're new someplace, if you've been someplace your whole life. And I think, so I think young people tend, I mean, this is anecdotal, I have no research backing so I think I think a lot of young people have times when they sort of just wander away from faith for a while. Not necessarily because it's deliberate or because they need to, or because there's been a schism or anything like that, but just life gets in the way, transactional life, as Ahmed was saying. We have to go find jobs, we have to pay our bills, we are trying to find love, all sorts of things that sometimes faith just doesn't factor into, and it is a values thing. Valuing faith comes alongside whatever else we value, and values change through life. And so I think people, I think the three of us are really lucky in the sense of, I think we'll feel pretty grounded in our faith, and that hasn't necessarily ever gone away in a big way. But for a lot of people that isn't the case. For example, my dad wasn't he was kind of religious growing up, and then he wasn't as religious, and then he had kids. And he said, I want this for my kids. And then he came back, and now he's super into it. Very into like Jewish, Buddhist meditation stuff. So he's gotten back into it in his own way. And he's young at heart. But I think there's the idea of, I can't speak for other people, I can kind of only speak for myself, but I think part of what can bring people back is finding a place they can call home in their faith. And depending on the size of your religious community, that's a big thing. For example, Temple Sinai isn't huge. It's a pretty decent size for what I expect in Wellington, but compared to like a synagogue in Chicago or Boston or New York, where it is. And that means that we, I think, have an obligation to make space for all strengths and for all needs as much as we possibly can. So some people might want to use the temple for prayer. Some people might want to use the temple to just get a group together and watch a movie. Some people might, like Solomon taught a challah baking class. Like people wanting to connect to how to make a home that is based in faith, grounded in faith. And everyone wants something different, so I can't speak to what young people need, but I think everyone needs something different, and the more we can make space for what is different, the more people will find their way to what they need.
Life gets in the way, and I think that's at different times of your life, you value different things. And I think, personally, from a Christian sort of background, and I think there is hope, because there are young people there, but I think they struggle to find like-minded sort of groups. In a Catholic sort of circle, I wouldn't say yearly, but every 3-4 years we have this thing called World Youth Day event, and that's when thousands or millions of young Catholics do meet up at a city, maybe in Rome or Spain, and it's event after event of trying to rediscover your faith in the modern society. But the thing that is constant is His love, and in some ways, if a young adult, like for me to say, I question that every day and how that love kind of evolves. So that's one is being values and struggles of daily life. Life does get in the way, but it is like a whisper in the back of the mind that He brings us close. We pack our lives too much that we can't hear anything else. So when you're actively making that space alone. It's hearing his voice and being present. So I find beauty in attending or participating in the Mass where we receive the Eucharist, because we receive Him and we are able to share that love. So I think I deviated from the question a little bit. But it's the struggles of, like, I think that is the main struggle, is that it's outdated. But I don't think that's an issue. I think it's been remaining constant for many, many decades. It's just how we get back into that line is a mystery, because He calls us. He's the same God, but He calls us differently.
I was actually sitting in a major conference in America a number of years ago, and I remember there was a research paper being presented, and basically this was for America. For every one Muslim who entered, for every person who entered Islam, one person left. And for Christianity, they were saying in America, for every one person who entered Christianity, 6 people left. So I was like, it was the first time I was hearing these stats, so I was actually quite shocked to hear these things. I thought people come to Islam and they stay in Islam and they never leave Islam. That was kind of my mindset, because people around me were pretty much more or less, yes, they were maybe less practicing, maybe they were holding on to their faith, but ultimately they stayed Muslims. But then it kind of opened my eye to like a new world of people who were living their faith. And I became interested and started doing some studies. I came across another study in America once again. It talked about why Muslims were leaving their faith. There were things like philosophical reasons. They couldn't perhaps reconcile some philosophical ideas with Islam. There were social norms that they were trying to reconcile, the norms of today, what happened in the past. I guess we're talking about religion being outdated. I also agree that it definitely isn't outdated. But then a lot of it was about personal experiences that people had. And like I was just again reading another news about one of the churches where there was unfortunately that sexual abuse once again. I just saw another news from America. A Muslim cleric unfortunately also abused his position and also getting involved with sexual abuse with a child or with children. So hearing all these things are not obviously very conducive to people trying to hold on to faith, especially youth, where they're being presented by a world of entertainment, movies, music, and so many distractions that really deter us from the inner calling towards faith and God. I do believe that we have inner calling, and we all at some point ask these questions, and youth do the same thing as well. But it's just that they get switched off because of all these distractions, social media, etc. But ultimately, I believe that it comes down to what value do people attach to faith. This is what I think. Because once we believe in something, it has value for us. We make time for it. It doesn't matter whether it's the hustle and bustle of life, the grind of life. I know people who take up challenges, 70-day challenges, and they fit 2-3 hours of exercise, and like in their 24-hour day. So we could make time for it, but I feel that the youth don't see the value anymore. And I don't want to blame the youth for that, to be honest. I think we really need to question as to, especially the leadership, and I am also a bit of a community leader as well at the same time, amongst my community. How do I represent my faith? What kind of value do I show for my faith to people around me and to youth specifically? What role models do they have around them that they can say, oh wow, I want to be like this person who's successful in life, who's an engineer, who's a lawyer or whatever, but sometimes a very devout and practicing Muslim or a Christian or Jew, let's say. So I do think these things are missing to a great extent at the moment, and the youth are just not seeing value to a great extent in religion.
My next question is, what are the most pressing issues for you as a young person of faith?
I wrote 2 things down. They are not related to each other, but let's see which one I'm going to talk about more. So, in terms of most pressing issues, I guess the one that came up for me, and it might be just today, full disclosure, I'm incredibly tired. My neighbors have been setting off fireworks every night till 11:30 for the last week and a half. I do not like them very much right now. And so when I said most pressing issues, I was like fatigue. Because I guess even just thinking about, this is a conversation I've had, not just in my faith community, and other volunteer organizations I've been a part of, is the idea of when you are part of a community where people give their time freely, and give it with love and in the spirit of community, a lot of times people, and I also have trouble saying no to basically everything, but because people care and give their time freely, people get really burnt out. And I think when I see the community and I am asked to do something or step up for a role that I maybe wouldn't have considered doing, but people say, oh, you're young. And I think it's the idea of I want to act in the best interest of my community to build in sustainability, and so that means that I can spread myself too thin, and I see that with other young people who are involved in similar situations of people want to help, but then they get burnt out from helping. Oh my God, what just happened? Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna pull this away. So people want to help, and then people get burnt out from helping. And again, now I've got, since you said transactional, that's really in my head. The idea of, part of, life is really transactional, and it can, I think, sometimes young people can see faith as another transactional thing. Like being in community can be seen as transactional. And that's been, I think, a struggle for me. As a young faith who's also, like, when I was on our board last year and I was chairing the board, and again, I did it because I wanted to help. And community life became transactional. It became emails. It became people wanting things and me feeling like I couldn't give them those things. And I think that part of that fatigue that young people can feel in faith is that faith doesn't feel joyful, and I think faith really should feel joyful. So I think that's part of it, is that fatigue. The other side of it, and this is like a more global thing, is I wrote the ways in which we fail to take care of each other. And that's within our own faith communities and beyond our own faith communities. And I know, you were saying earlier about sitting down as a Muslim and a Jew. Actually, that can be a really hard thing to do. I think we live in a world where people do live in echo chambers, and they do live by sound bites or the things people share on their Instagram stories or TikTok. I'm not good at TikTok. But the things that we see on social media, we tend to assume bad faith in others. We want to tell people our opinions on things without actually listening to what their opinions are. We are really bad at holding space for each other in today's world, and I think that's something that, I think that's a pressing issue for me as a young person of faith, because I think part of what faith should do, and I don't like shoulds, but I think part of what faith is meant to do is to build bridges, and I feel like we're kind of setting the bridges on fire, and that is really pressing for me.
This is great because I'm actually very. That's good. I'm a very, very quiet person. Pressing issue that I think is in this modern society is now that internet is just on our fingertips, and so we have access to a lot of different news or social media outlets that it kind of influences perspective in certain things on what we value and what we mean. And so you get the bad side of things, but you also try to find the good things. And it's very easy to fall into the bad side of things because that's on the news. It's like, child abuse in the Catholic, and then that kind of like, you get a lot of comments of people. It's very exhausting and it's very demoralizing to look at them. So that's one pressing issue, is that though we have information at the tip of our finger, it's the external influences, and it's a challenge and a struggle and an issue that how do you bring back young people believing in what is true and what is meaningful and valuable. Is there a two-part question?
Yeah, no, I think it was just, what are the most pressing issues for you as a young person of faith?
It's the external influences and how we see what is true or not. I think, again, going back to for me, it's just sitting in silence and really trying to hear his voice is a bit more, it's more powerful, even though it sounds, from an outside person, it might look delusional because I'm really quiet thinking about it. But it again, I think he puts a clarity in my mind to see what's true and meaningful. And going back to your point, it's struggling to be there for one another because we have a lot of opinions, but growing up as well, I've always been told that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should listen more than we should talk. So I love listening. What did I do? But it's having a sit down and having a conversation and a dialogue to know what's true. But yes.
Thank you, beautiful. For the Muslim youth, I think the challenges and pressing issues are very similar to the rest of the youth, to be honest. Like for the high school students, they want to get a good mark to go to a good university, or they want to get a good job somewhere, go to TAFE, etc. Trying to live through broken families. Like there's also a lot of broken families in the Muslim community as well. Those who are finishing uni, trying to find jobs. We're speaking with Solomon. It's like I'm trying to find a full-time job in communication, in journalism. So I guess a Muslim who's studying journalism or finishing journalism would probably be that mindset. Okay, where do I find a job? So these issues exist for Muslims as well, to be honest. But I think, especially lately, what I'm kind of seeing is a lot of the Muslim youth, whether practicing or not, whether faithful or not, these big world events are impacting them, especially like the conflict that's happening overseas at the moment. I'm kind of seeing, unfortunately, a lot of anger in Muslim youth, a lot of isolation, sometimes marginalization. And I guess we talked about these echo chambers. These echo chambers are really not helping Muslim youth as well. I've actually held meetings with them where, I've tried to give a more balanced approach to things. But some of them were not happy because I wasn't angry enough, or I wasn't coming out as strong as they would like me to come out. And what happens as a result, I think, is probably the most pressing issue at the moment is giving meaning to all these things. Like, how's God, let's say, allowing suffering, allowing these things to happen in the world. Children are dying, people are dying, innocent people are dying. And I don't mean, by the way, just Muslims, on both sides, people are dying at the end of the day. And this just in the world as well, in different countries, different regions. So I'm seeing, especially the Muslim youth and the Muslims in general, they're trying to make sense of what's happening, especially through their faith, because Muslims are quite attached to their faith, more or less still. They try to still live their faith through all these difficulties that they're seeing around, and continue with their practices. Like Muslims pray 5 times a day, you got to wake up every morning. Yet a lot of youth are at the same time traumatized. Like I've seen it with my own eyes. Once a young man came, and he goes, for 1 week I haven't been able to do anything. I'm like, why? Then he started showing me some footage from things happening overseas. I said, brother, you gotta stop watching this stuff. You gotta, I took him out to lunch. Called him up in the morning. I said, get up, get to work. So these are issues that and then he has to practice his faith on top of that, right? As a Muslim, that's because I feel Muslims are a bit of spiritual athletes. They've got to pray 5 times a day. Starting at 6 a.m. to last prayer is 10 p.m. in summer. So it's a bit of an issue while we're mentally having issues as well. So yeah, I think that's probably what's happening in the Muslim space at the moment.
My follow-up question for that is, thinking of the pressing issues that we've all spoken about, if you had appropriate support, what actions would you take to make our world a better place? I'm not sure upon rereading that whether that was about the last question or about the entire world, but interpret it as you will.
I'm going to ignore the bit of the question that asked about if I had appropriate support, because what I think the actions I would take, I think, are very basic human things. I was looking at these questions and I was like, what do I need to make sense of these questions? And one thing that I find helps me make sense of the world is it's a counseling modality, and it's called existential psychotherapy. Very exciting for me, probably only me. But existential psychotherapy is so basically, broadly speaking, it relates the idea that all human beings can and do experience distress and anxiety related to what Irving Yalom called the ultimate concerns: death, freedom, isolation, and meaning. So Mick Cooper is a Scottish psychotherapist, and it is this exercise where one is asked to consider a bunch of quotes related to that. And the first one is the one that I think is most important, and it's from Martin Buber, and he says, "All actual life is encounter." And Mick Cooper says, from an existential standpoint, when we see human beings in non-human terms, we do violence to people and lose the very essence of who they are. And I think the action we need to take is we need to sit with each other and encounter each other at a really basic human level. I once said to someone, I don't think someone's asking me my opinion because they want to hear my opinion. They're asking me my opinion because they just want to be able to get theirs across. And it's the idea, and it's similar to what I said a few minutes ago, but it's the idea of basically exactly what Darlene said. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Sometimes we should have 2 ears and no mouth. I guess someone has to do the talking. But, sign language exists. Okay, but I think it's the idea of we really need to let each other exist in a world with nuance. People are really passionate, and that's a really good thing, and people are really angry, and it is very okay to be angry, because this is a world that anger is a very valid emotion. But I think passion rarely leaves space for nuance, and sometimes we are so passionate that we don't leave space for each other. So I think just the action I would take is what I think we should all try to do, telling people what to do. But it's the idea of making space for each other, making space to listen, shutting our mouth, opening our ears, realizing that even if the person sitting in front of us is saying things that we don't understand, that doesn't mean that it's coming from a place of harm. It's usually coming from a place of fear. People are frightened. And yeah, we just need to make space for each other. That's the action I would take, is just trying to be a better listener. Just 2 years, one now. I'm going to tell that to many of my clients.
Following on from that, I think you're right. The basic sort of in a human level is just being there for each other, and also having a conscious understanding that a lot of things are beyond our control. What we can do is just offer to God that we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what the truth is, only He knows. And it's basically being there for one another and holding that space, as you said, making that time and space. And I think also there's a word that's in my brain at the moment, is forgiveness. It's a big thing, being able there to not just to forgive yourself, but forgive the other person as well. And try to understand, make that dialogue, get that dialogue going, a conversation, because at the end of the day, everyone has a dignity, as a human, has a reason of why they're here, and it's a beautiful thing when someone who knows that there's a higher being controlling, and they're being part of their journey and understanding what that is a beautiful revelation, I think. So it's being present with the moment and holding that space for the other person. Forgiveness and yes.
Well, for me, I would think that as a Muslim, or perhaps people of faith, we need to be confident about our faith and not be shy about it. Again, as I kind of mentioned earlier on, the society that we lived in, unfortunately, is slowly pushing us all to our own corners and expecting us to just practice our faith in our own circles or in our privacy. And I don't mean we should go out and preach and try to convert people, but I think we need to be confident about our identity without being coercive and trying to impose what we think or what we believe onto others. Because if number one, we're not confident, then how can we ever talk about change and making a better world and all these things that we discussed today? So I find that very important as a start. And perhaps the second thing would be creating meaningful engagements with the wider community and people of other traditions, groups, etc. And trying to understand one another, which Abby has nicely touched on. Like when we were in Auckland, I had a very good chat with the young Jewish panelist, and he was telling me about how he's slowly getting back into Judaism and his faith, etc. And I was just honestly trying to understand, why is he turning into his faith? And when I met Solomon as well, then we started discussing these things as well. Like, oh wow, a very similar pattern. And I was trying to ask some genuine questions just to understand what's happening in his life, So, and he started asking me questions, right? So it was really, I think, a very genuine experience. That's how I felt anyway. That we're trying to learn about each other, and honestly, your perception about people is shaped through these genuine and authentic experiences. I did talk about being transactional in the past. I've done a lot of chaplaincy work, so we dive deep quite quick with chaplaincy. but that's very important. Like we need to kind of really be vulnerable, open, and really engage with one another. So if I had the appropriate support, I guess programs like this, but other, especially with youth, like we do a lot of it in Sydney, to be honest. Like we have, for example, an iftar dinner once a year with schools, and it gets booked out. We usually get about 15 schools from Christian, Jewish, and Muslim backgrounds. We break bread together in Ramadan, and we make sure we place on each table people from different faith traditions. And they absolutely love the experience. Like by the end of the night, they're all taking photos, and they're exchanging phone numbers, etc. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of volunteers and finances as well to be able to put these things together. So I wish we can increase those organic engagements and experiences with one another in various programs and projects.
We've talked quite a lot about the various ways in which religion tends to exacerbate the growing pains of young people, moving on from being in a religious family or community and trying to find themselves. I wanted to ask, and this is kind of revisiting a question we brushed over earlier, what are some of the ways in which your respective religion does actually help young people in growing up and learning how they can find themselves?
How does my religion? Well, I think one thing that I quite like, and I mean it's not specific to Judaism, it's sort of all faiths, not just Judaism, not Abrahamic faiths, all faiths. We love a life cycle event, and I think that can be a really meaningful thing for young people, is the idea of feeling supported in their faith as they go through the seasons of life, like having a bat mitzvah, or going to Sunday school, having to learn the thing, almost not just lifestyle, but the stuff that you don't like when you're a kid but you value as an adult. Vegetables, Jewish vegetables. For example, my sister and I had to go to Sunday school, and when we were preparing for bat mitzvahs, we'd go to midweek Hebrew, and when we were preparing for our bat mitzvahs, we had to do a community service project, and I think all of those things, and every year the whole Sunday school did different volunteering in the community, and I think it's the idea of the more we can support our young people to recognize sort of what faith means for them, that's a good way we can support young people in faith. I've wandered off, but I think the other part is the idea of, and I know it's the idea of showing people that religion isn't just the stuffy bits, it's also the fun bits. I think, this is loud now again. I think, going back to the idea of joyful faith, joyful Judaism. We all have things we like about our faith, and it's not just, it sounds like, we're all pretty grounded in the prayer and the faith aspect, but there's also fun things like making new friends and, going on trips, having a dinner. I know a lot of religions have summer camps. That might be an American thing, but the idea of giving young people a chance to connect with each other. I think that's a good way that faith can support young people in feeling grounded in their faith. In terms of supporting young people to get through the world, young people got a tough world to get through. I think the more we can do to just actually share the things that are important about the values we put out in the world, a lot of what I think I've realized more in going to religious services is actually how much gratitude is practiced through faith. Every Saturday morning we thank we have a list of things. We have a list of daily miracles that we thank God for. We thank God that we have vision, that we are healthy, that we've made it to the day, that we can care for each other, that we have the ability to be in the world. And I think gratitude is really important for young people to cultivate, because anyone, but also young people. And I think the idea of Tikkun Olam is a big thing that I've already talked about, but the idea of showing young people that faith isn't just prayer. Faith isn't just fun. Faith is also values that you weave into the fabric of your being, of who you are, what is important to you, how you want to show up in the world, who you want to be. And that can start from birth, that can start from adolescence, start when you're a young 40-something. Values, lots of values.
Catholic or Christian space. Sunday school as well. I remember going at least an hour or two before Sunday Mass back in Malaysia. I don't remember retaining a lot, but I think it's very important because your parents are also your first teachers, and having parents who are very faithful, bringing you to church is very important. Other events that are in the Catholic or Christian community is we regularly have Bible studies. We have summer camps. We can call summer camps, which is camps. annual camps, I guess, where you have other youth or teens, or also sort of in that stage of life where they have friends there, they want to keep them in their life. So there's a lot of community involved in there. It's being involved.
For Muslims, I guess I did talk about that. Usually, someone doesn't leave their home until they get married, right? So it's a similar thing with community as well. Yes, we want to produce adults who can make decisions independently, who are mature and who know what they're doing in life. They don't need to depend on others, perhaps, to make decisions. And live their faith as well, if they were to kind of on their own. But with Islam, you're actually never supposed to leave your community. Wherever you go, you're supposed to be part of a community where you are. There's Jummah praise, Friday praise, which is compulsory, that you go to a mosque or a place of congregation to pray. You can't pray this prayer at home. With all the rest of the prayers throughout the week, you can pray at home, but this one, you have to go to a mosque to pray, which means you got to meet the community once a week, at the very least, that is, right? And obviously, it's very much encouraged to pray in the mosque as well. So the community has a very strong role of kind of growing the individual, but at the same time, obviously, the individual also, especially this day and age, you come through a lot of challenges, and you go out to the world, workplace, university, etc. You need to be able to stand on your feet. Especially with young people, I think when they go out to the world, they're seeing a lot of fun, they see a lot of enjoyment, they see a lot of leisure, entertainment, etc. We're seeing, for example, when I was at high school, my friend who was Turkish and Muslim, his father was very strict. He wouldn't let him go anywhere out at night time. Whereas my dad was an imam of the mosque in the community that we lived in. He would let me go. I snuck out to, let's say I would, make up something to go to that 16th birthday party that I was talking about. I dyed my hair, and my dad was still okay. It was a big thing in the community. I'm just thinking, how did my dad allow, thinking back then. But then, this friend of mine, his father was so strict. When he turned 18, he said to his father, if you tell me anything from now on, I'm just going to leave home. So for the next 2 years of his life, he was just out drinking, partying, hitting up girls, etc., which Islamically speaking are not appropriate. He just went down the roller coaster, unfortunately. So I guess we've been talking about the enjoyment side of faith as well. Like, alhamdulillah, praise be to God that Islam is something that also allows for enjoyment. And for example, the Saturday school that we do, similarly, we do Quran teaching, we do some Islamic discussions, but then there's food, there's sports, there is they're together as as young people. So we just got to make sure, I think, for at least for the Muslim youth, what we try to do is that while they're learning their religion, they also have fun, and they don't feel like because they need to practice their religion, they need to give up on the world altogether, or they need to detach, withdraw to a mosque to be able to be a good Muslim. No, in the contrary, Islam actually encourages people to integrate with the community and says that your work is worship, your study is worship. So it gives that mentality where you really integrate and you engage with every aspect of life, while still enjoying your time, your family, and the other things that you do in your life. So I think youth need this a lot, especially nowadays, where they can receive enjoyment and entertainment from many different sources.
Awesome, thank you for the answers. So this will be my last question, and it is, I think one of the things you can all relate to is being part of a non-dominant religion in the place where you live. I guess it might be a bit different for you, Darlene, as a Christian, but as you mentioned, you're from Malaysia, which is officially an Islamic country. I was just wondering if you could speak to some of the difficulties of being both a young person in faith and a person in the diaspora, so to speak.
What a last question. I think I find that I do explain things a lot to people. People are very curious, I think, about Jewish people, or Judaism. And generally the people I meet are curious and not malicious. Yeah, I think a lot of it's about sort of being open to answering questions and people wanting to know things. I lived in Poland for 2 years. I lived in Warsaw. I was teaching English in preschool there, and I needed time off for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I had to explain to my bosses what those were and why they were important. And for those who aren't aware, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are sort of the holiest days of the Jewish calendar. And I lived in the U.S. where, like, even for people who don't know that many Jewish people, they generally know a bit. But in Warsaw, there aren't a lot of Jewish people because of the Holocaust and the fact that it was so utterly devastating to the Jewish population of Europe that a lot of Polish people don't know anything about Jewish people or what it means to be Jewish, and that was really difficult. And it wasn't malicious, it was curious, but it is still hard sometimes. And I find that it's really difficult living in New Zealand because people say it's a secular country, but somehow quite a few of our stats align with Christmas and Easter. And that really messes with my leave. When I need to justify my leave for things like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but I can't switch it with Christmas and Easter because everything's closed. So I find that to be really difficult, and I will continue to rant about it until my employers listen. And the only job that I've had that actually took that seriously was a job where one of my Muslim colleagues had been taking time off for Ramadan, and they just got it. And I was like, wow, how refreshing. And so, yeah, and I have a lot of people who have questions, in my life who have questions about Judaism. My husband's not religious, his family's not religious, not even close to Jewish. And I think that can be a whole other thing. They're really lovely, and they want me to feel like my faith is included as a part of their life. my mother-in-law always checks in with me in terms of like when it's Pesach and I can't eat things with flour or grains. She says, okay, what can I make you? And then there are like harder questions that people ask, like, well, your mom isn't Jewish, so you're not Jewish, right? Because the only thing they know about Judaism is that it's matrilineal, and they don't really know that there are other things that exist in faith than just one idea. So that's difficult. So yeah, I think I loved living in Boston. There were a lot of Jewish people there. There were a lot of synagogues there. Kids get school off for Rosh Hashanah. It's fantastic. But yeah, every place is different, and I think it's been a real education trying to navigate this life as a minority faith. I don't know. This has just become a rant, so I'm gonna sit to
Very good answer.
Yeah.
Growing up in Malaysia, predominantly an Islam country, it has also, the religion has become part of the politics, and it's kind of like controlling as well the education system. So in other faiths as well, whether it be Buddhism or Hindu, they don't get much of the opportunity or the equality, which is kind of sad. Maybe sad actually. We don't because it's quite overpowering. Which is very fortunate for me that as my family moved out of Malaysia, we are able to see outside in. So practicing our faith in Malaysia can be like eyes are looking at you, or they start having voices around. So it's kind of like, should we do this? Should we not? But it's about being bold and brave, and we still sort of like make signs of the cross when we pray for our meals in public spaces. And then occasionally we get like some of the conversations of like, oh, why do you do that? And that's an open conversation of like, we're praying grace, we're praying for the nutrition of the food that the hands that people have prepared the food. So yeah, it opens some kind of dialogue. But there's also another challenge when I moved here as a family, because it's such a secular view, and being in sort of like a private public sector, it's kind of difficult to also navigate being open about your faith. But it comes, and I guess, in a understanding and respecting of as an individual human being, because they promote a lot of other things at work as well, and that we may not always agree, but it's always the human dignity that's the importance of it. I struggle still, but taking it a day at a time. I think having a strong faith and trusting everything to God is the best that we can do.
I think there's pros and cons, to be honest, to be, I guess, in this state that we are in. Perhaps the cons are, like as we talked about, and Darlene as well, you struggle, Muslims too, you have Eid, prayers, sometimes they can't take day off as well, which goes in a weekday. I've seen that happen. Ramadan, not every employer is also understanding to that. They can take time off. We're fasting while everyone else around is eating. Like you go to your workplace and people are going to have their lunch, etc. So there are challenges like that. But then I also see the opportunity here too, personally, that hey, here is an opportunity that I have a chance to speak about my faith, right? So I remember when I was doing my master's in economics, the class was such that it went between 2 prayer times, and it meant that I had to miss one of the prayers if I was to sit the whole 2-hour lecture. So what I did was I went to the lecturer the first week. I said, look, if I sit the whole class, I'm going to miss my prayer. I'm a Muslim, I need to duck out for 5 minutes and go for prayer. So please don't think that I'm leaving your lecture, right? And you know why I'm leaving. So I remember going out the first week, it was only me. The next week when I did that, 2 others came out with me as well, right? So they were Muslims too, but they just were feeling a bit shy to perhaps talk to the lecturer and not coming out. So, and I actually consider myself quite lucky for coming to Australia, because had I been in Turkey, I've just been raised with Turks around me and perhaps with many different biases. But in Australia, I think it's a very lucky country, to be honest. Yes, there's bigoted people, yes, there is discrimination, perhaps racism, but to a great extent, it's a very welcoming country, and I find myself quite home. I actually call myself an Australian Muslim. I don't call myself a Turkish Muslim. I identify with Australia more right now, because I've spent the majority of my life there. So yeah, while I do acknowledge that there's challenges and difficulties, perhaps now that I've been working in an Islamic organization for the past 5 years, it's a bit easier for me, because on 8 days we give time off to everyone. So being a center manager, I have a say in that as well, even better. But I think there's a lot of opportunities as well, that if we are confident about who we are, we can use that in a way to express who we are and what we stand for as well.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists for all the great answers they've given.